Most people think owning a gas station is a license to print money. Cars pull in every minute, fuel keeps flowing, and the register never seems to stop ringing. But what if I told you that some gas station owners generate millions of dollars in annual revenue and still spend years wondering if the investment was actually worth it? That's exactly why Michael Turner wants people to hear his story before they sign a lease, buy a property, or invest their life savings into this business. Today, Michael owns a busy gas station in Texas. From the outside, it looks like the kind of business many people dream about owning. The location sits on a high-traffic road, hundreds of customers stop by every day, and the fuel pumps stay active from morning until late at night. To most people, that sounds like guaranteed money. In fact, friends, family members, and even complete strangers often assume Michael must be making a fortune simply because they see so many cars coming through his lot. But according to Michael, that assumption is exactly what gets people into trouble. Because what most people see is revenue. What they don't see is everything happening behind the scenes. They don't see the massive startup costs. They don't see the operating expenses. They don't see the regulations, the maintenance, the insurance, the payroll, and the constant pressure that comes with running a business tied to one of the most competitive industries in America. And perhaps most surprising of all, they don't see where the real money actually comes from. When Michael first started exploring the gas station business, he believed many of the same things most aspiring owners believe today. He thought fuel sales would be the engine driving profits. He thought a busy location automatically meant strong cash flow. And he thought that once the business was up and running, success would mostly take care of itself. What he discovered was something completely different. In fact, one of the biggest surprises came before his doors even opened. Because the moment Michael wrote the largest check of his life, he realized this business was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. And that check changed everything. Years before he became a gas station owner, Michael Turner was working in commercial logistics and watching investors around him buy businesses that generated recurring cash flow. Self-storage facilities, car washes, laundromats, and gas stations all seemed attractive because they served everyday needs. No matter what happened in the economy, people still needed fuel, groceries, drinks, and convenience items. The more Michael studied the industry, the more convinced he became that owning a gas station could provide long-term financial stability. What caught his attention was not just the number of customers. It was the appearance of consistency. Every day thousands of vehicles traveled through his area. Every day people stopped for fuel, coffee, snacks, and basic necessities. To Michael, it looked like a business model built around traffic. If enough cars passed the location, success seemed almost inevitable. So he spent months researching available properties, reviewing financial statements, and talking to brokers. Eventually he found a station that appeared to check every box. It sat near a busy highway corridor, had a well-established customer base, and generated several $1 million in annual sales. On paper, it looked like the opportunity he had been searching for. But then came the moment that changed his perspective. The purchase price alone was far higher than he originally expected. Then came additional costs. Legal fees. Licensing requirements. Environmental inspections. Equipment evaluations. Inventory purchases. Working capital reserves. Every step seemed to require another check. Every conversation uncovered another expense. By the time everything was added together, Michael realized he was committing well over $1 million to acquire and operate the business. It was the largest financial decision he had ever made. He remembers sitting at the closing table staring at the documents and thinking about how many years it had taken to save and invest enough money to reach that point. Once the papers were signed, there was no easy way to reverse course. The money was committed. The responsibility was real. And for the first time, Michael began asking a question that many first-time buyers never consider until it is too late. What if the business was not as profitable as the revenue numbers suggested? At that moment, he still believed the station would perform well. What he did not know was that his biggest surprise was waiting just a few weeks away, hidden inside the very first month of operating results. The first month looked incredible from the outside. Every day customers pulled into the lot, fuel pumps stayed active, and the convenience store remained busy from morning until night. When Michael reviewed the sales reports, the numbers seemed to confirm everything he had hoped for. Revenue was flowing through the business exactly as expected. Thousands of gallons of fuel were being sold. Customers were buying drinks, snacks, and household items. On paper, it looked like a successful operation. Then he sat down to calculate what was actually left over. That was the moment everything changed. Michael had spent years hearing people talk about gas stations as cash-generating machines. What he discovered was that revenue and profit were two completely different things. The station could generate tens of thousands of dollars in sales during a short period of time, but a surprisingly small percentage remained after expenses were paid. Fuel sales were the biggest shock. Most customers assumed station owners made substantial profits every time someone filled a tank. Michael quickly learned that the margin on fuel was far thinner than most people imagined. A few cents gained or lost per gallon could significantly impact profitability. Even when fuel volume was strong, the economics were not nearly as attractive as he expected. Then came the operating costs. Employee wages. Credit card processing fees. Utility bills. Insurance premiums. Equipment maintenance. Inventory replacement. Property expenses. Every week seemed to introduce another bill that had to be paid before the business could generate meaningful profit. What surprised Michael most was how easy it was to confuse activity with success. The parking lot could be full. The pumps could be busy. Customers could be lining up inside the store. Yet none of those things guaranteed strong earnings. During those early weeks, he found himself paying far more attention to margins than revenue. A large sales number looked impressive, but margins determined whether the business was actually creating wealth. As he studied the reports more closely, another realization emerged. The most important financial numbers were not connected to fuel at all. In fact, some of the highest value transactions happening on the property had very little to do with gasoline. The products generating the strongest margins were hiding in plain sight, sitting just a few feet away from the pumps. And once Michael understood where the real profits came from, he began looking at the entire business in a completely different way. As Michael continued analyzing the business, he uncovered the reality that completely changed how he evaluated the station. The fuel pumps attracted customers, but they were not the primary source of profit. In many cases, gasoline functioned more like a traffic generator than a profit center. People stopped because they needed fuel, but the real opportunity began once they stepped inside the store. A customer might spend $50 filling a truck, generating only a small amount of gross profit for the station. That same customer could walk inside and buy a coffee, a fountain drink, a snack, or a prepared food item, and those purchases often carried dramatically higher margins. The difference was eye-opening. Michael started reviewing product categories one by one. Packaged beverages delivered stronger margins than fuel. Fresh coffee often generated even better returns. Convenience items, snacks, and certain grocery products consistently outperformed gasoline from a profitability standpoint. The more he studied the numbers, the more he realized that the business model was not really built around selling fuel. It was built around capturing customer traffic and increasing the value of every visit. This discovery changed many of his operating decisions. Instead of focusing exclusively on fuel volume, he began paying close attention to store layout, product placement, inventory selection, and customer experience. Every additional purchase mattered. Every product category had its own economics. Every square foot inside the store had the potential to generate more profit than a significant amount of fuel sold outside. Michael also noticed that some of the most successful operators in the industry thought exactly the same way. They viewed fuel as the hook that brought customers onto the property. Once customers arrived, the goal became maximizing the profitability of the entire visit. That mindset explained why many stations invested heavily in food programs, specialty beverages, loyalty programs, and convenience offerings. The highest performing locations were often operating multiple businesses at the same time. They sold fuel, but they also operated a retail store, a beverage business, and sometimes even food service under the same roof. For Michael, this realization answered one important question. He finally understood where the real money came from. But it also revealed another challenge. Because while the profit opportunities were larger than he expected, so were the hidden costs that most buyers never see coming before they sign the paperwork. Once Michael understood where the strongest margins came from, he assumed the hardest part was over. It was not. In fact, the deeper he went into the business, the more hidden costs he discovered. These were expenses that rarely appeared in conversations between first-time buyers and brokers, yet they had a direct impact on profitability. One of the biggest surprises involved the infrastructure beneath the property. Most customers only see the fuel pumps above ground, but underneath sits a complex system of storage tanks, monitoring equipment, piping, and environmental safeguards. Maintaining that system is not optional. Regular inspections, testing requirements, compliance standards, and preventative maintenance all cost money. And unlike many other businesses, delaying those expenses can create much larger problems later. Then there was insurance. Before owning the station, Michael expected insurance costs to be significant. What he did not anticipate was how many different forms of coverage were necessary to properly protect the business. Property coverage, liability coverage, employee-related policies, and environmental protections all added to the operating budget. Utility expenses created another challenge. The station operated long hours every day. Fuel pumps, refrigeration units, lighting, point-of-sale systems, security equipment, and climate control systems consumed energy around the clock. Even small increases in utility costs could affect monthly profitability. Equipment maintenance became another ongoing reality. Refrigerators eventually needed repairs. Fuel dispensers required servicing. Payment systems had to remain functional. Store fixtures wore out over time. None of these expenses were catastrophic individually, but together they created a constant stream of costs that demanded attention. Michael also learned that regulations evolve. New compliance requirements, updated technology standards, and changing payment systems often required additional investments. The business was not something you could buy and simply leave untouched for years. It demanded continuous reinvestment. What surprised him most was how these hidden costs separated successful operators from struggling ones. The owners who carefully planned for maintenance, upgrades, and compliance generally performed better over the long term. Those who focused only on revenue often found themselves caught off guard when large expenses arrived. By this point, Michael no longer viewed the station as a simple fuel business. He saw it as a collection of interconnected systems that required constant management. And that realization led him to another discovery. The operators earning the best returns were not necessarily selling the most fuel. They were building something much bigger around the traffic coming through their property every day. As the months passed, Michael stopped thinking like a fuel seller and started thinking like a traffic owner. Every vehicle entering the property represented an opportunity, and the most successful operators understood how to maximize that opportunity. The station was no longer just a place where people bought gasoline. It was a collection of businesses working together under one roof. The convenience store became the center of that strategy. Customers arriving for fuel often walked inside for reasons that had nothing to do with gasoline. Some wanted coffee before work. Others grabbed energy drinks, bottled water, snacks, sandwiches, or basic household items. These purchases seemed small individually, but together they created a powerful economic engine. Michael began tracking customer behavior more carefully. He noticed that a customer spending $60 on fuel might generate only a modest amount of gross profit. Yet a customer who added a coffee, a breakfast item, and a snack could dramatically increase the profitability of that visit. The economics were impossible to ignore. That realization influenced nearly every decision he made. Product selection became more important. Inventory management became more important. Store cleanliness became more important. Employee training became more important. Even the placement of merchandise inside the store affected sales performance. Michael also studied higher-performing locations across the industry. Many were expanding beyond traditional convenience retail. Some added fresh food programs. Others focused on premium coffee. Some operated quick-service restaurants inside the property. Others integrated automated car washes that generated additional revenue streams. The common theme was simple. They were finding ways to increase the value of each customer visit without relying entirely on fuel margins. Over time, Michael realized that the strongest operators were not necessarily the ones selling the most gasoline. They were the ones creating the most profitable ecosystem around customer traffic. Every product category, every service, and every operational decision contributed to the overall financial performance of the business. This shift in thinking transformed how he evaluated growth opportunities. Instead of asking how many gallons he could sell, he started asking how much value each customer could generate during a visit. That single change improved his understanding of the business more than anything else. But even with a better strategy and stronger economics, Michael soon discovered there was one mistake that continued to hurt owners across the industry, and it was often disguised as a smart business decision. One lesson Michael learned very quickly was that not every busy station is a profitable station. In fact, some owners unintentionally damage their own business by focusing on the wrong metric. The mistake sounds logical at first. Lower fuel prices, attract more customers, sell more gallons, and increase revenue. On the surface, that strategy seems impossible to argue against. More traffic should mean more money. But Michael discovered that the reality is far more complicated. Early in his ownership journey, he watched competitors aggressively cut fuel prices in an attempt to win market share. Drivers naturally responded. Lower prices attracted attention and increased volume. The stations looked busy. The pumps stayed occupied. Yet when Michael studied the economics behind those decisions, he noticed something concerning. Every cent removed from the fuel margin reduced profitability. When margins are already thin, even small pricing decisions can have a significant impact on financial performance. Some operators became trapped in a constant pricing battle. One station lowered prices. Another matched them. Then another lowered them again. The result was more volume but often less profit. Michael realized that winning the volume game did not necessarily mean winning the business game. He began approaching pricing differently. Instead of trying to be the cheapest option in the market, he focused on delivering value across the entire customer experience. Clean facilities. Reliable service. Well-stocked shelves. Strong product selection. Friendly employees. Those factors encouraged repeat business without forcing the station into an endless race to the bottom. He also learned that customer traffic only creates value when the business is structured to monetize that traffic effectively. Selling thousands of additional gallons means very little if profitability disappears in the process. The strongest operators understood their numbers in extraordinary detail. They tracked margins. They analyzed product categories. They evaluated customer behavior. Every decision was based on economics rather than assumptions. Looking back, Michael believes many struggling owners are not failing because they lack customers. They are failing because they misunderstand where profit actually comes from. Revenue creates excitement. Profit creates wealth. And confusing the two can become an expensive mistake. The longer he operated the station, the more confident he became in his understanding of the business. Eventually he reached a point where he could answer the question every potential buyer wants answered. Knowing everything he knows today, would he make the same investment all over again? After years of operating the business and seeing both the strengths and weaknesses up close, Michael finally arrived at an answer that surprised many people. If someone handed him the capital he originally invested and asked whether he would buy another station today, his answer would not be an automatic yes. It would depend entirely on the location, the numbers, and the opportunities beyond fuel sales. Early on, he believed success came from owning a gas station. Today, he believes success comes from owning the right gas station. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Looking back, Michael does not regret the investment. The business taught him valuable lessons about cash flow, operations, customer behavior, and long-term asset management. It also generated income and provided opportunities he would not have experienced otherwise. But he admits that the learning curve was much steeper than he expected. If he were evaluating a new acquisition today, he would spend far less time looking at fuel volume and far more time studying customer traffic patterns, store performance, product mix, and growth potential. He would want to know how much revenue came from high-margin categories. He would examine the condition of the equipment. He would analyze maintenance history. He would review local competition. Most importantly, he would ask whether the location could support additional profit centers beyond gasoline sales. Michael believes many first-time buyers focus on the wrong numbers because revenue is easy to see. A station generating millions of dollars in annual sales sounds impressive. But experienced operators understand that the quality of revenue matters more than the quantity. A smaller location with stronger margins can outperform a larger operation with weak economics. This perspective completely changed how he thinks about investment decisions. Today, when people ask whether they should buy a gas station, he never gives a simple answer. Instead, he asks questions. What is the traffic count? What are the margins? What is the condition of the property? What opportunities exist to increase customer spending? Those answers determine whether a location becomes a strong investment or an expensive lesson. And after everything he has learned, there is one final truth about this industry that Michael believes every potential owner needs to understand before making a decision. After everything Michael experienced, the biggest lesson was surprisingly simple. A gas station is not really a fuel business. It is a traffic business. Fuel brings people onto the property, but the long-term success of the operation depends on what happens after they arrive. That realization completely changed the way he thinks about ownership, profitability, and growth. If he could go back to the beginning, there are several things he would do differently. First, he would spend more time understanding margins before focusing on revenue. Early on, large sales numbers created excitement, but he eventually learned that profitability tells the real story. Second, he would perform even deeper due diligence on equipment, maintenance history, and future capital expenditures. Many of the most expensive surprises in the business were hidden beneath the surface. Third, he would evaluate every opportunity based on its ability to generate multiple revenue streams rather than relying heavily on fuel sales alone. For anyone considering entering the industry today, Michael believes the best approach is to think like an investor rather than an operator chasing volume. Study the location. Understand the customer base. Learn the economics of every product category. Pay attention to traffic patterns, competition, and long-term growth opportunities. Most importantly, understand exactly where profit is created and where risk exists. He also encourages new buyers to avoid falling in love with the appearance of a business. Busy parking lots can be misleading. High revenue can be misleading. Even strong customer traffic can be misleading. The numbers behind the operation matter far more than what is visible from the street. Looking back, Michael does not see the station as a simple retail business. He sees it as a system. A system built on customer traffic, operational discipline, cost control, and intelligent allocation of capital. When those pieces work together, the business can become a powerful cash-flowing asset. When they do not, even impressive revenue numbers can lead to disappointing results. And that is the principle Michael wishes he understood before writing the biggest check of his life. The businesses that create lasting wealth are rarely the ones that look the most impressive from the outside. They are the ones where the owner understands the economics better than everyone else.